So again, fear of getting it wrong, hopefully some of that will be alleviated with this. I am one voice, and I am a very boring one compared to the wonderful queer people who are out there in the world. I'm here today because I'm lucky enough, because the fact that I am able-bodied, I am neurotypical, I am white, that I don't face near as much violence as many people who do have intersectional identities. So I'm robust enough to take these questions, and we're talking about being robust over on that table, weren't we? You don't have the right to ask people on the street questions that aren't relevant to the conversation that you're having. So hopefully today is an opportunity to ask some of the questions you've always wanted to ask and have them answered by me. The best technique though, and I said this about consent, is listening, but get to know people first. Don't just walk up to someone on the street that you perceive to be queer and just ask them a question. Get to know them first, buy them a drink, buy them dinner. Right, so like I said, I have no idea what's going to happen at all. No idea. You ready for the first one? Took a lot of risk, Nick, allowing me to do this, because I don't know what you're going to ask. You okay? You are. Okay, here's my question. So what can I do if I work in an organisation, i.e. trust, with no interest in LGBT plus employees or patients? Gosh, okay, so that's a really tough question. Thank you for that. I was just hoping you were going to ask what non-binary means. It's a really difficult question. I guess I'm going to dip into an experience I had back when I was 16, my first job. I worked for Lego. It was my first job. It was ultimately a Saturday job that turned into more than a Saturday job, and it was still when the law allowed me to be made or fired for being gay. I had no protection as an employee because of my sexuality, and there was absolutely zero interest at all in protecting or supporting me when I came out. In fact, I would almost go as far to say that I experienced a level of bullying, which was banter. Everybody loves that word. Never use that word. If you say something, it's not banter, it's just rude, okay? And I didn't really have anywhere to turn, but what I did do is I turned to Stonewall, okay? And I'm a fan of Stonewall for many reasons, but back in the day they represented my only channel of support when I was all alone, and I called them and I went through to their helpline and I said, what can I do? And they said to me, Ali, you can't do anything. And unless you're safe to risk your job, there's not really much you can do. But don't worry, we're working on it. And that's the truth of it, right? We can't fix everything straight away, but there are organisations out there working on it. And when you're working for an organisation that isn't a mechanism of support, you've got to make sure, one, that you're safe. And that's the most critical thing, because unfortunately what we don't recognise sometimes is that the queer community has to put itself at risk in order to achieve equality. And that risk is fine if it's someone like me standing up in front of a group of people asking questions, but if it's someone's job or livelihood, it becomes much more challenging. So reach out, speak to Stonewall and ask for advice would be my advice today. But remember, legally, you are protected now, so that if things are bad, you need to make sure that you're engaging with your HR department, or maybe, if you can, see if you can seek out a sympathetic executive. Is that okay? How we felt okay, positive about that? Next question. Okay. Yeah, it's a really good question, this one. Why are you here doing nothing much when you could be doing something useful in the hospital? Well, I couldn't do anything useful in the hospital. Quite frankly, because I've got zero medical training. Although, I did do a first aid course once, and as we know, they are the most useful people to have around in any emergency. But it's a good question. It's a question that I often find is presented in any operational team, and I had the same dilemma when I led the LGBT network at American Express. We were a call centre environment, so the leadership would say to me, Ali, look, we love what you're doing, it's great, but you can't have anyone from the call centre do it because we need them on the phones. And this is problematic because it presents us with a dilemma. Business versus the good stuff, the advocacy. I think it's important that we recognise that not everyone can participate in the LGBT networks as much as others. I think we need to create space. The networks need to find ways to engage with those people. Lunch and learns are a brilliant way of doing things. And I know lunch breaks can be different for different scheduling, but even if you get a small group of people together who have a shared interest, who can talk over a cup of tea once every few months, that can sometimes be enough. Or creating virtual networks. Is anybody familiar with Tea and Empathy? So Tea and Empathy was set up by a doctor up in Newcastle, and it's an online social group of people who share stories about the challenges of working in healthcare. And it's all virtual, it's all done through Facebook, it's all done through social media, and it's just a space for doctors and nurses to connect and go, I had a really hard day. And somebody else to go, yeah, me too. And sometimes that's enough. So whilst I understand the operational challenges, make space if you can. And leaders, if you can, find any budge in that scheduling where you can give people an hour every quarter, then do it if you can. But great question. I received excellent care in A&E recently for a rugby injury, so thank you for that. Do you ever get asked, how do lesbian women have children? All the time, actually. It's a common question. I actually had this question recently, and I think this is worth bearing in mind. If you're going to ask someone a question that you wouldn't ask a heterosexual couple, don't ask it, and like I said, unless you've bought them a cup of tea or dinner. Do we have any heterosexual people here today? No, don't worry. No, I'm just going to... No, hi... Fine. If hypothetically someone in the workplace asked how you would hypothetically have children, how would you feel about that?
I'd say I can't anymore, I'm too old.
See, well, that is a robust human. That's not a fragile human. But you might tell them to pipe down, mightn't you? So yes, is the answer I do, and I tell them to pipe down. Like I said, don't ask questions of people if you wouldn't ask a straight person, especially if you don't want the nitty-gritty details, which nobody wants. Put you off your lunch. An excellent question. And if you do want to know how lesbians have children, Google. Next one up. How long have we got? I'm probably vastly overrunning. Oh, I'm not. Okay, here we go. This is lovely handwriting. This is obviously not a doctor. Very good. What do our rainbow lanyards mean? Do people have to have specific training or sign a pledge? This is really... if I deferred this question to you, Nick, how would you feel? Is there a special... is there sort of like a duty that is kind of connected to the lanyards? Do you have to sign a pledge?
Lanyards were introduced by our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team, and they do send out an extremely helpful little note to explain what they're there for and why. And yes, we do ask people to make a commitment in wearing their lanyards and their rainbow pins about sending out that message of inclusivity.
So don't take it lightly. Okay? If you're wearing that lanyard, you need to be an ally, okay? Don't just sit there being passively an ally. You need to be actively an ally. And actually, that's an interesting point, and one that, if I was a better presenter, I would have said in my actual introduction. Old school, millennial, it was kind of, it wasn't okay, but it was kind of broadly accepted that you weren't a homophobe or a racist or ableist if you just sort of sat about not being aggressive to people. But that's not really a good benchmark, is it? I'm just sitting here not being racist. Read a book, if you can, by Rennie Edo-Lodge, which is an incredible book which repositions our duty as allies, and it's specifically about race, but I think that some of the learnings could definitely be translated into queer activism. It is not good enough just to not be racist or not be homophobic or not be ableist. You have to go out there and actively fight it. Actively say no to it. Unburden yourself of all of the nonsense bias that you have deep inside you, and that doesn't go away by sitting there not being a racist. You have to fight, and you have to do work, and there's a lot of self-reflection. The psychotherapist will understand that. It takes a lot of self-awareness. So read that book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. It changed my perspective. I'm pretty confident it will change yours as well. Anyway, rushing over. How are you finding it so far? Fine. Any feedback so far?
All good.
Excellent, good. Few and far between, but they are there. Oh, another set of lovely handwriting. When talking to someone in a formal setting, and you don't know them, it's common to refer to them as sir or madam. What is a gender-neutral alternative? Excellent question, our first non-binary question! It's a really good one, because I'm actually a performer some of the time, and this was actually one of the things I had an issue with. So I like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that I'm about to do. And there are lots of good alternatives. Esteemed guests is a good one for a sort of formal presenting situation. Folks is probably my favourite, but the sir or madam one, I don't know. It's a difficult one. It's a bit like aunt and uncle, which is another one which I haven't worked out yet. So if anybody's got any tips, do let me know. There are certain terms that we haven't got a natural gender-neutral term for. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you could just say adult human. But it doesn't have quite the same ring. Your Highness. Again, probably going too formal at that point. You know what? Ask the person, how would you like me to refer to you?
How would you like me to refer to you?
Yeah. How would you like me to refer to you?
Okay, Laura.
Hello, Laura. It's lovely to meet you. And that might be sufficient. Let's not gender people without their consent. It's a bit creepy. Look, I'm going to say this between you and me, right? So when I go into a meeting room at work and someone decides to call me Ms. or Mr., depending on what I'm wearing that day, I'm like, basically you're introducing me by what you think my genitals look like. And that's really creepy, isn't it, frankly? Like, I haven't said, I mean, it's not even you've asked me. You're just making the assumption, aren't you? It's not, it's just, let's just stop doing it, okay? Unless they give you permission, or unless you're a doctor and then you're just being introduced by your wonderful qualifications, the impact that you're making on society and the community. Let's all be doctors. Oh, okay, so this is definitely one that's not within my range of personal experience, but I think it's a really important question. What is the best way to tell my friends and family that I'm HIV positive? So I think this is one that I would say, I'm not to defer from the question, but this is one which I think needs the support and insight of specialists. And you know, there are lots of organisations in Brighton who do a superb job of giving people the support that they need in order to navigate what can be a very treacherous situation. And there was a discussion earlier about what it was like in the 80s and the damage and stigma that was done by the way that society handled that crisis and the repercussions that it's had on today. As whilst we're more enlightened and aware, stigma still exists. And perception sometimes trumps reality. And this is certainly a situation where I think what we think is the truth is quite far removed from the truth and the reality. So I'd say if you are navigating that, do not do it alone. If you're in this city, you have a rich river of resource and support and love. My goodness, so much love. I love you. I promise you that everyone in this room also loves you. So seek out that support, and if you need a helping hand, just reach out to someone that you trust, or again, like I said, reach out to those resources that are there and willing to help you on that journey. But that was a really brave question, so can I give a round of applause for that question, please? That's a good one. That's a really good one. On the gay scene, some moles are bears. Some males. my head, though, moles were like baby otters. And otters are baby bears, so it kind of made sense. So for those who aren't aware, gay male culture has provided us with some really complex demographics. I mean, I literally cannot keep up with it. There's twinks and there's twonks and there's bears and there's daddies. I mean, again, don't even ask me, I don't understand. So male bears tend to be big boys with beards and hairy chests. So a female bear... What is a female bear? Let's go with mole. Should we just go with mole? Yep, so we've just created a new demographic. Although I have to say, quite frankly, since I've turned 30, I'm acquiring quite the beard myself. Natural, it's very wonderful. Okay, what is it like to be non-binary in a male-female society? Confusing, very confusing. So everything, I mean literally everything is cut up into two sections, male, female, man or woman. It is everywhere, and it is everywhere that it shouldn't be. It is there from childhood, it is reinforced. And I know that for some of you, you'll be like, obviously, but just take a moment to reflect on why we do that. What is the purpose of that? What are we trying to communicate by having these segregations? Are we saying that men are inherently violent, scary, problematic, and that women are inherently vulnerable, passive, and at risk? And now, I'm not one to contest the statistics here, but the truth of the matter is that we reinforce this separation by creating a world which is split so obscenely into two sections. When I spoke earlier about identity versus expression, my problem is that when I go into a loo, for example, in London, where perhaps the whole queer culture thing isn't quite as prolific, I'll get misgendered, or I'll be asked to leave loos because of the way that I express myself. As even before I start talking to them about my non-binary identity, normally they don't give me a chance to talk about it. It becomes very difficult because I am being asked to comply or exit again, and I could put on a dress and quite comfortably use the loos in London or wherever I happen to be, or I can ask politely for the world not to make a judgment call based on what I look like. So I'm probably creating drama for myself by choosing not to comply, but I don't want to not be myself because I think that's really important. Yeah, and I think also it's difficult for parents because they're getting mixed messages at the moment that if you don't reinforce gender stereotypes, then your kid might become trans spontaneously. A bit like we worried about the heterosexuals becoming spontaneously gay when Section 28 was removed. Nobody's spontaneously becoming anything, they're just being themselves, I promise. Do people think you have to transition first before you realise that you are non-binary? Yeah, absolutely. So I think there has been a focus on binary trans people, so people who identify as man or woman. I don't think we have quite got to this place yet where we fully understand what it means to be trans or non-binary, and I think we're still finding place within that framework. And like I said, sex is one thing, and there are lots of people in this world who need support around their sex in order to align with who they feel they are. That is critical, and it is life-saving. We're not doing this because it's fun or easy, we're doing it because it saves people's lives. Thank you. In terms of what it means to be non-binary, aside from that, it is about allowing us to exist beyond the expectations of male or female or man or woman. It doesn't require me to have any intervention that doesn't suit what I need and who I am. So I'm as non-binary as anybody else. So if somebody chooses to have hormone intervention or surgical intervention, they can still be non-binary, as in I can also choose not to have intervention and still be non-binary. Again, Gen Z are all over this. We're a little bit far behind. Unless there are any Gen Z people in here, and if so, I'm sorry. You should come up here and say a few words. How long have I got? Last question. Actually, you know what? Sod it. I mean, excuse my language. Choose one. Oh, it's a short one. What does cis stand for? Who has heard the word cis before? Okay, who has not heard the word cis before? Just 2 people again. Fabulous. So cis is a term, okay, so this is the controversial bit. Cis is a term that we use to... That's my... Get off the stage. Cis is a word we use to describe someone whose assigned gender at birth matches the one that they identify with now. It's not a rude term. It's not derogatory or intended to be putting a label on people that they don't want or need. It is purely a reference term. It's the same as the word straight. We describe people who aren't gay as straight, and we describe people who aren't trans as cis, and it's a helpful describing word. I think there's been quite a response to it from some people because they feel that they're being given a label that they don't want, and that they're just a woman or just a man, and they shouldn't have to be a cis woman or a cis man. Please let us use language. Language is useful. Without language, we can't get rights and we can't make progress. We make up words all the time. Think about the word lesbian. That word probably didn't exist in common parlance until it was used as a legal term. We use words to put a ring fence around concepts and ideas in order to talk about them. So don't fear the word cis. It's not a word that's used in a mean way. It's just a word to help us describe a different type of person's experience. It's been my absolute pleasure to talk nonsense with you for longer than I was given. Thank you for listening, and well done for today. Honestly, this has been such an inspiring afternoon of discussion and questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali. Humorous, thoughtful, and I think some great answers actually coming out of there, which is fantastic. I'm not going to hold you to ransom for 20 minutes while I feedback. There are a few points I'd like to make, if I may. One is actually, genuinely, I think today has been full of insight. It has for me, if I'm being honest as well, and I hope it has been for other people. I think there's been some very insightful, reflective commentary. Some of that's been about people feeling safe. You mentioned, Ali, risk, about how that makes people feel. I think there are different ways of engaging people, and perhaps we're a little bit standard about how we do that sometimes, so perhaps we need to reflect on that. I love your bit about don't ask questions that you wouldn't ask of a straight person. A nice de minimis approach to life, which is good. I think language can make people sometimes feel a bit wary and concerning, and I think we need to do something about just making people, as you say actually, you need to be a bit more active, not passive, in making yourself a bit more educated about language and how we use it, so I think that's really good. I think, and there were lots, I'm only summarising some of those, there'll be lots, and I know in the game where people weren't being too competitive and just wanted to win, that we did have actually some really insightful discussions at the table as well, and we'll collect some of that as well. I think the bit for me as well, when listening to Stonewall specifically, and I think some of the data is actually really concerning, and I think it's probably less bad in probably health and public sector actually, but some of the things that we were hearing, whether it's about the increase in transphobia, whether it's about a whole range of things that people still do not feel able to come out should they want to, and they filter, I think is sad actually in this day and age, and I do think we have an obligation to do something about that. So it was lovely to hear that we're doing, you know, we've made a good start, which we have in terms of our Stonewall and the index, but I think there is more to go, and we can see that from the staff survey too. I think the second point I'd like to make, well the third point really, is about what I've observed during the day, and we'll all have our own observations, but I have felt there's been a real buzz in the room. So we have 250 people here who have come in positive, going to enjoy today and going to get the most out of today, and I've really felt that, so really engaged, and I just really want to thank you for keeping that energy up all day. I think the discussions have been honest, which is important, and certainly at tables and that they've been very personal, and that takes quite a bit of courage to have those conversations actually at times, and particularly kind of when you feel, you know, you're in a busy room, etc. So that's good. Moving forward, you know, we will collect all the cards. I don't know who created the game. Who created the game, Nick?
Jess designed it and I worked on it with it.
Where's Jess? Jess, well done. Fabulous game. Genuinely, so clever. We have clever people working here, I'm telling you. But that was really, really fantastic as well, and I think it really enabled some of those discussions. So we'll collect all the feedback that we've heard during the day, that we can collect in terms of the action cards. I think we can learn a little bit from the questions asked of Ali as well, where people are coming from, and I think that's really important, and perhaps what more information is useful to cascade out, which I think is important. I think then we, and I use the we, will look at how we distill all of that information that's come back and to have a process to prioritise what we need to do to feed into our action plan moving forward that we absolutely do want to support and be accountable for actually in all of it. And that of course will be co-created through the LGBT team and network as well. We need to, again, just kind of probably review, Nick, how we feed back to people on a more routine. It's great to have this, and I think we should have an annual one every year, which would be brilliant. But that's, you know, it can't be just a one-year thing, so it's just about, I think we have some good ideas and are doing some good things already. And I suppose my last call, really, about moving forward, and I really do agree with Ali on this, and I could do a little pun there, would become allies. But I genuinely think this is something about not being passive, about being active, and about supporting all of the people that we work with in the organisation. So finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for coming. Give yourself a round of applause. I want to thank all of our speakers, so thank you very much. I want to say a special thank you to Nick, Neil, and the team who've all put this together, and Jess for her game. I don't think anyone can underestimate the stress this puts you under, particularly the day before the event. So it's, you know, a lot of investment goes into this. And I also want to thank Babs and team for the Stonewall submission, which gave us a great input today, which we need to use going forward as well. So just finally, thank you for coming. We'll keep this conversation going. It's been a fantastic day and a safe journey home, and I think it's still light. So good for that. Bye-bye.